As our societies get pulled further and further apart, you need to somehow bring them all together. This is the problem of social media. You've polarized societies and radicalized people. What's at risk here is not politics. It's a shared reality. It's facts.
What's the meaning of freedom of speech in our era in which social media is weaponized by populist leaders, extremists? They say they're being censored by the internet platform. There's content moderation.
The free speech is being used to stifle free speech. I was worried about this in 2014 when it was becoming clear that there would be personalized feeds for everyone. How do you have personalized feeds? We all have to live in the same reality. And, over time, it's 2022 now, those personalized feeds have meant that everyone's cognitive biases are amplified. And again, over time, using these algorithmic choices for amplification, this radicalization is not just in terms of acts against the state, but radicalization in terms of views of everything, from democracy, from vaccines, from climate change, right? Flat earthers. The impact, it starts with this individual reinforcement of biases. Facts are really boring. They don't spread. That's why the incentive structure of social media platforms are frankly wrong. They can make a lot of money at it, but they're destroying democracy. They're destroying our shared reality in the process. We need, in the short term, a new idea for how civil society, how civic engagement, how we work together to protect the facts. In the Nobel lecture, I called social media, an atom bomb that exploded in our information ecosystem. And what you're seeing today, the breakdown of law and order, the breakdown of checks and balances of a democracy, this is what you're seeing when there is impunity in the virtual world. It leads to impunity in the real world.
Our greatest need today is to transform that hate and violence, the toxic sludge that's coursing through our information ecosystem, prioritized by American internet companies that make more money by spreading that hate and triggering the worst in us.
Among the first people targeted were journalists, news organizations, opposition politicians. When you are attacked a million times, when gender disinformation is at a point where you're pounded to silence, the next step is to replace your narrative. You and I have both felt this, right? Exponential attacks, targeted. It's a two-pronged strategy that has worked from Crimea to Ukraine, from the Philippines to Brazil to the United States. And then beyond that, let me summarize this, right? Number one, free speech is used to stifle free speech. Number two, these words have different meanings. Number three, where does it all go?
As only the 18th woman to receive this prize, I need to tell you how gender disinformation is a new threat and is taking a significant toll on the mental health and physical safety of women, girls, trans, and LGBTQ people all around the world.
You've been threatened online, offline, you've been to jail. You've heard the worst, you've been called the worst names. How much of that is directly related to the fact that you're a woman?
Oh my God, everything. Gender disinformation is a phenomenon globally. Women in every country around the world, and it isn't just women journalists, women politicians are being attacked in these ways. When that happens, many women politicians choose not to run. Many women journalists choose to drop out. The impact is real.
In less than 2 years, the Philippine government filed 10 arrest warrants against me. I've had to post bail 10 times just to do my job.
Beginning in 2019, I was spending up to 90% of my time with lawyers and in court. What reality is that normal in, right? I have one conviction I'm appealing. It's cyber libel, a story I didn't write, editor supervised at a time when the law we supposedly violated didn't even exist yet. Now it's 2022 and decisions are up on 5 tax evasion charges that's coming up. For a period of time, I've lost the right to travel. The Nobel helped. When it was announced, all of a sudden I was allowed to travel again. I hope for justice, but these charges mean that I have already lost freedom. The weaponization of the law followed the weaponization of social media, and that is to the detriment of our society.
What explains the victory of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in the Philippines?
It happened at an extremely crucial period of time when a pandemic lockdown meant that tens of millions of Filipinos lost their jobs, when great fear and uncertainty after 6 years of Duterte and a very brutal drug war, when Marcos Jr. took many of the same themes of his father and promised unity. In his campaigns, when he opened his campaign, he mentioned the word unity in Filipino 21 times in 20 minutes. For me, the spark that really changed everything is technology. In 2014, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. began to use YouTube, used Facebook for wider distribution. This technology needs to be reined in. It is taking away free will. And then once they're democratically elected, they cave democracy from within. I mean, look, Hitler was democratically elected, right? I mean, I don't have to say anything to Brazil.
Não, tenho minhas mídias sociais.
Nós acompanhamos.
Eu tenho as mídias sociais. Se depender dessa mídia aqui, eu estava enterrado há muito tempo.
Bolsonaro was a far-right fringe until YouTube brought him to the center and mainstream media then took, right? Like, depending on which academic you're looking at, there's, I go back to social media, because their incentive structure was lies, hate, and conspiracy theories, right? Journalists and news organizations, we don't stand a chance in that world. So anyway, Bolsonaro's brought in, he becomes mainstream. This behavior gives everyone a permission for people to be their worst selves. I think the tactics towards the media is similar. In the Philippines, Marcos didn't grant any real interviews, not where he had to answer tough questions from journalists. What Marcos and Bolsonaro are doing they've created their own vlogger network, their own influencer network. And again, this goes back to the social media platforms replacing gatekeepers, right, with influencers. I really hate it when journalists are called influencers. For the record, we're not influencers. We are journalists.
Leaders who were weaponizing social media, such as Modi in India, Orban, Orban more like capturing media in general, but doing this, and now Duterte via his daughter, they all get reelected in a way. What works against these information operations? What's effective against that?
Right now, in this moment, we're powerless. Right now. Look, in the long term, it's education. In the medium term, it's legislation. In the short term, it is collective action. It has to be a whole of society approach to try to redefine what civic engagement, what democracy means today. That's what we tried to do for our May elections. That's what Brazil is going to have to do for your elections. I mean, do you really want to live in a world where you can manipulate everyone, or where democracy is destroyed, or we don't live in a shared reality? It's 2022 and it is getting worse. I'm staking my freedom on this. I'm staking my freedom that we will be able to do something.